All right, man. We're just kind of journeying our way through what we call encounters with Jesus, and this is going to be another one. I'm going to fast forward through some things. Like I told you, we're kind of specific. There's several bigger things that we saw that are in the scriptures. We're trying to settle in on some of these intimate issues, and it's getting down to the last few months, really, of Jesus' ministry now in their world, and so. They are getting away a little more frequently by themselves, and man, as I look at some of these things and just think, I think in terms of like, there's just this naive arrogance that I think the disciples have, where they think they got it. It's kind of like, yeah, I got it, and then you realize you don't have it. Like when you learn how to ride a bike, and your dad's kind of covering for you, and you're trying to figure this thing out. I got it, and then you don't. I remember that. Man, Tammy and I got our first house over in Clay on Old Springville Road, and I was pretty proud of that. I mean, I was like, 21-year-old kid. We had our house, and my dad came over and we were going to do some work there, and I was going to get up in the attic and do a little bit of work. And Dad was like, "Look, son, you need to be careful, And I'm like, Dad, it's my house. I got this. And so I've got my little extension cord on my arm, and I climb up the little ladder. It's one of those, you just kind of move the sheetrock over. It didn't have the nice little thing where you could walk up, right? So you had to move the sheetrock over, and then you climb up in there. And I was making my way through, feeling pretty confident about things. And then my extension cord caught on something, and it jerked me, and my foot fell right through the roof. And my first thought was, my dad is always going to think I'm like this biggest doofus, and the klutz, and so my leg's hanging down, and I'm trying to make sure everything's all right, my body's not broken, get my foot back out. And my dad was so gracious when I came down that step. I would have had so much fun with my kids, it would have been horrible. I would, but my dad was just so gracious, and we ended up patching the ceiling and all of that, but I just think, there's that place in life when you think I got this, and then you realize you don't. The disciples were doing this on a constant basis, and I think in truth all of us were and are. And so we're at what we call Peter's confession. This is some powerful moment in the scriptures. Let me kind of bring you up to speed with where it is. So we left off last week with them feeding the 5,000 and that whole process of like, where are we getting food? And how are we going to make this happen? And so they begin to figure things out. Jesus is teaching. Jesus always did life this way. He's always calling you to follow him. And then he wanted you to kind of just be with him, right? Just watch what he does. And then there would be a time when he would say, okay, now let's you do it. And I'm going to watch you. And then he's going to say, now you do it. That's the method. That's really what we call discipleship. It's just Jesus teaching us, and we learn from him what he did, and then he gives us an opportunity to do it, and he's with us, and then he turns us loose, right? I mean, he's always still with us, but I mean from a physical standpoint, that's what happens. And so this is how we grow, right? And I think I mentioned that to you last week of how you just take these little steps. Well, so they had finished with that, and then they move up north. They do a few other things, and then they feed 4,000, right? And some people think those stories are the same, but Matthew distinguishes specifically between that. We're not going to look at it now. But again, Jesus fed 4,000 people. And so those two stories are there. And like I say, Matthew because in one section he speaks of both of those, the 5 and the 4. And so he does that. And then Jesus walks on the water. Remember this? There's a storm. Jesus out there walking. Peter goes, I think that's Jesus. And so they're thinking it's a ghost. And he's like, no, I think that's Jesus. And he says, Lord, if it's you, let me come out there, right? And we're not going to tell that story today. And we're not going to go through that story today. But you know what happens? He gets out in the water. He thinks, hey, I got this. I'm focused on Jesus. And all of a sudden the storm starts swirling. And he looks away and he sinks, right? That's that naive aspect of things. That we always have to have our mind on Christ, always focused on him. When we shift one way or the other, we're going to start sinking. And so we're going to skip over that. He's going to warn the Pharisees, warn the disciples about the Pharisees and the fact that they're always going to want to mix error with truth. He calls it beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, right? Like leaven, kind of gets Jesus, or Paul rather, speaks of it as a little leaven. Leaven's a whole lump. He means that in the sense of sin. So he's talking to a church in Corinth, and he says, that you should abstain from those things, right? And so he says, if your brother's in sin, he won't repent, then you kind of put them out of the church in that sense, because a little leaven is a whole lump, right? And so a little bit of sin, a bad company corrupts good morals, that whole thing, and that's what he's talking about. So he's telling them, hey, beware of the sin, of the leaven of the Pharisees, because they're going to teach things, they're going to say things that aren't right. They're always going to mix works in there. They're always going to mix those things in there. And so there was that. And then he heals the blind man. And then we began to travel. Now, at this point, we're at almost the extreme north of Israel. We're above the Sea of Galilee. We're on the west side. We're in Caesarea Philippi, almost to Damascus. So we're almost in actually another region. And this is where we pick up this story. And so it's in Matthew chapter 16. He says this: when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do the people say the Son of Man is? Now, this is going to be more than just this isn't a, like pop quiz. He's curious about some things, but what he wants to do is know, who do you say we are? We've titled this Marks of Maturity because I think we're going to see three little snapshots today that are going to remind us that there is a growth that takes place. And so they had gone out 2 by 2 and they had shared the gospel. And so they've been talking to a lot of people. And so he's like, hey, so what's everybody out there saying? What are they saying about me? And here's what it says. When Jesus came to the region, verse 4, it says, they replied, well, some say you're John the Baptist. Because at this point, John the Baptist has already died, had his head cut off because one of the rulers didn't like what he had to say about his marriage arrangements that were wrong. And so he was killed. And so they're thinking, well, maybe John the Baptist come back to life. Some say that. And he says, then others say Elijah, and still others say you're Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Jesus looks at them and says, but now, who do you say that I am? This is a great question. Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's his answer. Now, Jesus is going to go on, and he's going to say, Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by Father in heaven. Now, let's take a minute and just kind of look at because she gave the right answer. And so in case we're curious about what that right answer is, he says, you are the Christ. Now, Christ is the Greek term for the Hebrew term Messiah, right? So we know that's what that is. There's the Christ. Some people think Christ is like Jesus' last name or something. It's not his last name. It's Jesus the Messiah. Jesus the Christ, right? The anointed one. The one that's been set apart. And so both of those words mean anointed. That's what that means, right? And so when you're the Antichrist, you're a pretender of one who is anointed by God. And so that's how that kind of works, right? But this is Jesus, or Peter rather, saying, I know who you are. You are the Messiah. That's big revelation. Because for a while they weren't really sure. They didn't know all those things. And then it says, he says, the Son of the living God. Now, anointed one, if we were to kind of break that down a little bit, because this is, what does it mean for Christ to be the anointed one? Throughout the Old Testament, you would have certain people that were anointed. You would have the prophets. They were anointed to tell the truth, right? And they would do that. They would speak boldly. They would say things that they didn't, that just like the mouthpiece of God, they would open and he would speak. And so the prophets were anointed. They were anointed to what? To proclaim truth. The priests were also anointed. They were handpicked by God. They were set apart by God to mediate between God and man, right? So that's that priest aspect, right? They bridged the gap, so to speak. They would go in and they would sprinkle the blood on the mercy seat, and they would cover sins for another year, and that's how that worked. And then, but also the kings were anointed. David was anointed. Saul was anointed. They were anointed to rule. And so when we talk in terms of the Christ, when Peter says, "Who are you, Jesus?" This is how we have to see him. He is the one that's been anointed to speak truth, right? This is what I love about about what we do here as believers, because it's even getting more and more worse about these falsities. Everybody's want their version of truth, and so we don't have an option. You and me, we know the truth. We know whatever He says. Listen, the world's going to tell us that what we think this Bible means isn't what it means, right? You hear that already, right? Listen, we can't play that game. The church is losing its power because there are denominations now who are going, okay, well, I guess maybe we're not right on that, so we'll go with what the world thinks, right? What they have done is say that, well, no longer is Christ the Messiah. We're going to believe that other people are, right? And then we're all many gods. I don't want to sound like the old man ranting. I'm just telling you that's the truth. And that's what's going on. And so when Peter says, you are the Christ, he's saying, you are the truth. Like, I know that. If you say it, it can. You know how he knows that? Because when he bid him to come out on the water, it was true. He walked on water. When they said, hey, go feed the 5,000 with this, it was true. They did it. When he gave them power to heal and to do miracles, as they went out 2 by 2, and they did, they knew one thing. This man speaks the truth, right? And so this is the confidence that they have in him. The second thing is that he is that priestly aspect. He's the one who mediates, right? He is the way. This is what they know. He is the only one. Sometimes I dabble in TikTok just to see what's going on and kind of see what my algorithms do. It is amazing when you get. So it's depending on how long you scroll, right? That's where it sends you. Oh, you like that, right? And so I try to scoot through the stuff I don't want to know about and get to other stuff. But sometimes the algorithm just takes you that way, and so you start seeing these things pop up. And man, it's crazy what people think is about you and me as believers, about God, about Satan, and that we're really a God unto ourselves. That we don't need fairy tales. This is what you will see a lot of in the world. And here's the reality. You and me and the whole world were born dirty, rotten, stinking little sinners. I know you hear me say that, but we have to know that. I don't pull myself up by my bootstraps. I can't just go, well, I think I can earn my way to God. Listen, and I know you and me know that because we've been in good churches. But a lot of the world thinks is they earn it, that they work that way. That's the whole basis and somewhat of the Catholic Church. They've meshed it together. And there's some good Catholics and there's some good people who know that Jesus Christ is the only way, but there are others who kind of hedge their bets, and so they're making sure they do the jumping through the hoops, right? And we don't do that. And Peter knows this. This is when he says, you are the Christ. This is what he's saying, that you are the truth and that you are the mediator. You are the way. There's no other way. I can't get there by my works, right? I can't get there by my mom and dad. I didn't inherit this thing. It's not something that can be passed down. I have to decide for myself that my sins have made a separation between me and God, and the only way to bridge that gap is God and His blood, right? I know I'm talking to people who know this, but let's just reason together. And then so also when he mentions Christ, that word encapsulated in that is that He's King. That is that He is anointed to rule. That is that He is Lord of all. This is what Peter said when he said, I know who you are. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He's saying, I know that you are the way, you are the truth, and you are the life. I know that you are the one who speaks truth, and you alone, that you are the one who can make dead bones live. You are the one who can bring and make us born again. You are the one who has the right to tell us what to do, and we don't get to speak back. You are the God who says the waves can go this far, and there they proud waves will stop. By His word, that happens. And so this is all what Peter means when he looks at this. He's saying, you're the one. This is the foundation. So here's the question. I guess, who do you think I am helps us give clarity. Like, you should clarify, who do you think Jesus is? I'm going to make the assumption that you and I agree who He is. But just in case you don't, I just think it's important that you clarify, who do you really believe He is? Because I will tell you this, to know who He is and not to walk in that the old adage, to know and not to do is not to know. There's no option here. If he's king, that means he's king. That means what he says goes. It's not an option. It's not like, well, I'll get to it someday. If he says this is that he is Lord of all, then I have to give him everything, right? This is just the way it goes. And so I think it's important to remind ourselves of that. Now, listen to what Jesus says in light of that, because this is really powerful. In verse 17, he says, Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven." He said, you know what? You didn't figure that on your own. God himself spoke that to you, right? You got it from somewhere else, and that's how we all get it. Nobody dreams it up from our own flesh this way. It is God himself who says that this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And so we see this, and he says, "Blessed are you, Simon. I tell you," he said, verse 18, "and I tell you, you are Peter." Now, that word, Jesus is playing on words here. Peter's name is the term Petros, which means stone. It's of the masculine verbiage, right? And so he's going to switch, because in our Bible it will say this rock and this rock, but listen to what he says. He says, "And I will tell you, you are Peter," right? You are rock. You are a stone. And on this rock, that's a feminine word, Petra, it means cornerstone. "On this rock I will build my church." Now the Catholic Church took this and goes, oh, God's going to build the church on Peter, right? Because they didn't really get this transfer, and he's playing on words, that, hey, you're a little stone. You gave a great answer, and I'm going to build my church on what you said, on the power of the truth. That truth that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, is the Petra. It is the cornerstone of everything else. And so this is what he's saying when he says this. And so he says, "I tell you that on this rock," not Peter, because the Catholics want to go, see, he was the first pope, and now that they have all the popes and all that. And I'm not trying to bash the Catholics today. I just want us to make sure we're clear on these things, right? It is Christ that is the rock. The church is built on him. He's the cornerstone. He's the foundation. It's not a man. It's built on him and he alone. And so this is what we need to see happen here. And then he says this, "And the gates of hell," or Hades, "will not overcome it." What does he mean by that? He means that death won't prevail. Listen, he's getting ready to tell them that death is his inevitable journey, and it will be for them too. And he's saying, but I want you to understand that this truth, that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, means that death has no hold on you. This is the power of what this is. And so he says, and then he goes on, he says this, "And he will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he warned the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. Now, it's silly that we have to have a conversation about this stuff, but there are so many branches of church today that say, we got the keys to the kingdom and we bind, and they want to turn that into like spiritual mumbo jumbo stuff. And listen, and I get that we do have the ability to command demons to flee and all of those things. But this isn't that. This isn't that we get to command things like we're mini gods. What he's simply saying is so a key in the scriptures means authority, right? I'll show you how this flows out. Peter, he has the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, and you'll see it in the book of Acts. In chapter 2, you can see that as he spoke, that he had Acts chapter 2, when he stood there and they said, "What must we do to be saved?" And he said, "Repent and be baptized for the remission of your sins, and you too shall receive this gift." He turned to that key, and all those Jews came to Christ. A little further down, you get to Acts chapter 8, and there's a Samaritan that wants to come to Christ, and Peter preaches the gospel to him, and he turned the key, and that he had authority so that they could understand the gospel of Christ. All he's doing is exercising the authority that Christ has. Same thing in Acts chapter 10. he's going to be told to go to Cornelius' house. He's like, man, I can't do that. He's like a Gentile. He eats that weird. He eats pork. I ain't eating pork. And he has a dream. You remember that? And the blanket comes down, and there's all kind of unclean food. And Jesus says, hey, I'm declaring all that clean. You can eat it now. He's like, oh, I'm not doing it. But finally he does. So what does he do? He goes and speaks to Cornelius, and their whole household gets saved. So key means authority. That's what it means. We have authority of heaven to proclaim the gospel. Nothing else. It doesn't mean all the mumbo jumbo stuff. He says, in what you bind simply means to loose, right? So it means, so that they understood this, and this is why it gets squirrely in church, because people don't do a lot of studying. But the word bind, when a Pharisee did it, meant that idea of declaring forbidden. Like this you can't do, right? If I bind something, this is off limits. That's what that means. I'm locking it up. You can't do that, right? We do that to our kids all the time. Hey, leave the house. Don't turn the TV on, right? Or don't do this, or don't turn the oven on, or don't turn, right? You're binding something. You're saying, no, we're forbidding those things. When you loose something, I go, hey, I'm home. Now you're free. Want to turn TV on? Turn TV on. We loose it, right? So what we declare here on earth has already happened in heaven. This is all he's saying. This is all that means. And so the reality for you and me is, and this is where I guess I want to come to, and then we jump into the others that come pretty quickly, is who do you believe Jesus is? That's the question, right? That you and me wrestle with. I know we know all this. I just want us to solidify it, right? And so then he says this, in verse 21, he comes to this section. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hand of elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. All right? So this is what he's saying. I told you, he's moving into that death thing, and he said, but hey, we don't have any worries. I'm coming through that thing. Now, this is where, so when I say marks of maturity, one is clarity. We're getting somewhere when we are solidly entrenched and know that Jesus is Lord of all, that he's Christ, that he's priest, and he's prophet, and he's king. I know that. Now, then we get to that confident place where Peter's going to get there. And so there's this correction that sometimes we don't know, and sometimes we think things that aren't true. And so just hear how it plays out here. He says, so he explains all that, right? Hey, I'm going to die. Here's what's going to happen. On the third day, I'm going to be raised to life. This is good news. Peter doesn't see it that way. Peter goes, hey, Jesus, hey, come here. Jesus, hey, look. Listen, he says, Peter took him aside, right? And began to rebuke him. Jesus, stop talking that way, right? Listen, this is a crazy story. Never, Lord, he said, this will never happen. You will not die. Jesus turns and said to him, Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. And so, listen, this is a big deal. He's like, hey, man, you got man-centered thinking here. And this is the problem. We start thinking that this whole world is all about you and me, and it's not. It's about him. Now, I'm going somewhere with this. I want you to make sure we're clear. But this is what he's saying. I know he's the Messiah, prophet, priest, and king. He's anointed. He's transferring a lot of that to us. But we have to make sure that we're not man-centered in our thinking. Peter's just thinking about himself. Oh, we're going to be together forever. And Christ's like, I got a bigger deal. This is something bigger going on. Peter was focused on earth. Christ is saying, no, it's about heaven, Peter. It's not what you think, it's what I think. And this is where we have to get this thing right. And so there's that correction that he's going to do. And then we come to this last section. And so let's just look at it quickly. He says in verse 24, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to come after me. Now he just said where he's going, right? I'm going to die, I'm going to be resurrected. If you want to come after me, which means if you want to die and get through it, here's how to do that. This is the gospel nobody likes to talk about. Here's what he says. For whoever, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. He gives us three things there. Deny himself, take up his cross, follow, right? So to deny myself means exactly what it says, that I'm yielding everything to him. It's what happens when couples get married. We deny ourselves, right? Like that, and Paul even uses those terms. My body is no longer my own; it belongs to her. Hers is no longer her own; it belongs to me, right? There's that aspect of yieldedness, of denying self, right? Like I have to regard others as more important than myself, right? There's a burden on me to do that, especially in the realm of marriage. Peter tells me this that I must live with my wife in an understanding way as with a weaker vessel. And so what that means is I have to figure her out, right? I mean, that's what that means, because that's the goal, to put her needs above my own. That's what it means to submit. That's all that means, to line up under. And so this is what we do. And so here he's saying, listen, the requirement is that you lay aside everything. The gospel is no longer about you when you come to Christ. It's about him, right? That's what it means. Deny yourself. Take up your cross. That is it. I'm willing to go, hey, I'm in it for the long haul. Wherever it goes, I'm going. If it gets hard, it gets hard. And it's going to get hard. We already see that in our world, right? There's going to come a point you're going to have to just make a decision, and it could mean your life. We see it happening in China right now. We see it happening in Indonesia right now. We see it happening in pockets of Africa right now. There's a lot of that going on. You take a stand, and you're going to die. Get the Voice of the Martyrs in their little magazine, man. We read it every month. It's crazy. But he says, you take up your cross, and then he says, you follow me whenever and wherever. We have to hold loosely to the things of this world. And I don't know what the Lord's calling you to do. I know where I'm going. I know that's why I went part-time, because I'm thinking this is where the Lord's going to have me. And I know I'm starting to think of certain things that I'm doing, right? And you have in your own realm, right? I'm not talking about what God's calling you to the mission field. Maybe so. But maybe it's right here. Maybe it's your neighborhood. I'm just saying, he says, deny yourself, take up your cross, and then follow him. And I think we don't want to do that. We do, I think. I hope my church does, our church. But the American church tends to want to not do that. They want cozy. They want comfortable. Here's what I'm telling you. God's going to put you in places where you are. Some of you have places where you work. You have neighborhoods. You have all those things. And in all of those areas, this is what he's calling us to do. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. So when I go to work at Tracery Stone, it's not about Randy. I'm going to deny myself. It's not going to be about me trying to play nice and I don't hurt anybody's feelings. I'm going to speak truth in love, and it may cost me something, right? And I'm going to do whatever and whenever he says. If he says say it, I'm going to say it. If he says do it, I'm going to do it. This is where I'm trying to get in my own life. This is the call of the gospel. And so I want us to think about that. Last week, we looked at the feeding of the 5,000, and I asked you, hey, let's take stock of your resume, of the gifts and talents that you have, because just like the disciples, they had to look around to see what it was they had, and then they stepped in faith and began to apply it. Listen, we really as a church have to we can't just sit soak and sour. We got to get out there. We have to do some things. And so sometimes together, but sometimes individually. And I'm just asking you to think through that. This is what he's speaking of here. He's saying, hey, listen, just really in conclusion, clarity. Do you know who he is? Correction. Are you willing to turn whenever he says to? And third, are you committed to everything he wants you to do? This is giving up everything to become his servant. That's the message that that we come out of this text today. And so, man, it's been burning in me. Hope it is you. I got a great song.